Imagine how happy I am that I was right about Capitano sacrificing himself. I'm fine,
You're
really.
not really fine.
But on a brighter note, in my 5.1 analysis video, when I tried to guess the traveler's ancient name, my first option, Wokoti, Savior, was wrong. But then I said, another option could be Tumaini, Hope. And when Shilonan said that same name, it was a huge satisfaction. Anyway, today we have quite a lot to talk about, so I'll keep the intro short, but first. This is a theory video, and leaks are prohibited in the comment section. I will use information available in the game, but my theories and conclusions are not to be considered the official lore of the game, unless I got something right and it's confirmed in a later update of the game itself. So, put on your feather hat and let's start the video. First of all, the story of Natlan isn't even remotely over. There are still a lot of unanswered questions and unresolved matters that I'll point out throughout the video, but I think they'll come up again in Mavuika's second story quest, which will give us the true ending. As for 5.3, our main goal was to defeat Gosoythoth and stop the invasion of the Abyss in order to end the endless war in Natlan, and we actually did it. This victory was only possible thanks to the combined effort of the Lord of the Night and both the living people of Natlan and the souls of the people we met but died during the story, because in Natlan no one fights alone. When it comes to Gosoythoth, the Reaper of the Abyss, we witness its ability to mimic and twist the memories it extracts from the Leylines, which it used to try to defeat Mavuika both physically, using Xbalanque's body, and mentally, twisting the words of her predecessors, Xbalanque, Xumucul, Cochanina, and Dengue, to drive her to despair. Despite the fact that we literally fought a manifestation of the Abyss, we haven't really been told what exactly Gosoythoth was, nor did we learn anything new about the Abyss, even though Natlan is the one nation that has been fighting against it since forever. This might be one of the unanswered questions that could come up in a future update. Back to the fight, something very weird happened. After a while, we read that the gates from the Dark Abyss was controlling our actions, the traveler got marked and got caught, and we suddenly ended up in a Temple of the Spirit, where Gosoythoth was still trying to convince Mavuika she had no chance to win. How did we get there? I have no idea at all. More importantly, Mavuika found the traveler in front of a monument with the sacred flame inside and the Abyss looming over it. On the surface instead, the sacred flame went out, but thanks to the faith of the people who sang the Ode of Resurrection, the flame got its power back. The Lord of the Night gave the traveler the mantra behind this ancient name, obtaining the Night Soul's blessing, and then together with Mavuika we extracted the 1,000 blazing suns from the sacred flame. Now, what was that monument? My theory is that we finally saw a divine throne, especially considering that in the description of Mavuika's new weapon, it is said that after Xbalanque negotiated with Ronova, the rules were crafted into a divine throne, so it was probably created in that specific occasion. This also reminded me of Fossilor for obvious reasons. The Temple of the Spirit is a place inside Mavuika's mind, just like the place Neuvillette met Fossilor was inside her consciousness, but above all, she sentenced herself to death in order to destroy the Hydra Divine Throne. So could it be that these thrones are not in Celestia, but they simply exist inside an Archon's consciousness? Still in the Temple of the Spirit, we heard something we're very familiar with. The description of the Agnidus Agate Gemstone says, "A pilgrimage for a wish, a battle to earn a name. Burnt to cinder for a dream, if the intention yet remains, achieve someone's truth he has." Which is basically what Mavuika said while walking on the Spirit Way.
We embark on a pilgrimage for the wishes of the people. We choose to battle, to earn a glorious name. And in the end, we burn to cinders for a dream. And so this cycle continued. Time after time.
What she left out, achieved someone's truth he has always been the most cryptic section of that description, and after 5.3 that redacted name is still unknown, so this is most likely yet another unresolved matter that will come up in a future update. Now, I believe the redacted name is Xbalanque because in Tumaini's description, his successors, Shumuko, Kochanina and Denge, all fell into despair when they became Archons, because they learned the truth about Xbalanque's 1,000-years-old lie, how his utmost wisdom birthed the utmost paranoia, and as he held both time and death, which by the way is wind and fire, in his hands, he doomed Natlan to an endgame without solution, so the cycle that continued time after time that Mavuika was talking about. Furthermore, we don't know who is going to achieve this truth, we only know it's a man, and it's definitely not the Traveler, otherwise we would've got two versions depending on whether we chose Ether or Lumine. Lastly, Tumaini's description also talks about history and memory being warped, something that won't affect the Traveler as we saw in Sumeru. So as I said before, there's still something very important that's supposed to happen, and it might be related to how everything got rewound in Ignition. Something kinda weird during the Archon Quest was the Lord of the Night telling the Traveler to ignite his fire and bring forth a miracle reserved for the Divine, but also the mantra being about someone setting themselves flame to bring light to the universe. The Traveler's Night Soul's blessing is also very similar to Mavuika's one, and they were both able to wield the 1,000 blazing suns, something Xbalanque created for the Pyro Archon. This to me sounds like the Traveler didn't just unlock Pyro, he basically became something like a Pyro Archon. Could it be that this is what the Traveler has been doing in every nation, but it was never as obvious as it was in Natlan? I will talk about this later in the video with a very unique theory about Xbalanque, so keep this in mind for now. Equally weird is how the Traveler has been associated with Tenoch. Kongamato told the Traveler he reminded him of Tenoch, and then later the 6 heroes appeared around him professing their faith in Tenoch, the One and Many, although I haven't figured out this title yet. Not gonna lie, for a second I thought about Wash a Clown, but that's impossible. Still, although weird, it makes sense that he was associated with the Traveler for a single reason. The heroes have always been 7, or better yet, 6 plus 1. Xbalanque fought with Uenuku, Ahpub, Ishquie, Yupanqui, Manku and Lianka plus Ochkan, who didn't belong to any tribe. The second Archon's team was kinda problematic because the Scarlet-Eyed Youth represented the hero from the Flower Feather clan, and he fought with Atahualpa, Huascar, Sakuk, Yupanqui again, and Dinga, and just like Yupanqui, Ochkan was still alive, but he became the enemy. Then 500 years ago, Mavuika fought with Tupac, Wanjiru, Sunjata, Burkina, Sanhash and Menilek, plus Tenoch, who was expelled from the Masters of the Nightwind, so he also didn't belong to any tribe, which could explain why he wears clothes and accessories from every tribe. Even the adventure team in Ochkan Natlan had 7 members, one of which Taika was once again Ochkan. Lastly, in the present, Mavuika fought with Mualani, Iansan, Shilonen, Kinich, Ororon and Chaska, plus the Traveler, who doesn't even belong to Natlan in general. So the logic answer should be that Tenoch is somehow related to Ochkan. Maybe he's a descendant like Bona even though he bears no Flamelord's blessing. But how is Tenoch related to the Traveler? Well, in Mavuika's story quest, the Traveler asked himself whether she had ever felt tired or hopeless, and even though he never voiced that question, she replied in a flashback, showing a scene that we've never witnessed in Natlan. Those were not the Traveler's memories, they were scenes from 500 years ago. Let me explain. Auroron's blessing engraved in Tumaini talks about hero being the starting point for the Traveler, and in Natlan whenever a word is quoted it's usually an ancient name. Coincidentally, in Mavuika's trailer she touches an ancient name with SJA engraved on it, and in Swahili, Shuja means hero. Now, before they fought in Marijivari, Tenoch had already lost his ancient name, and when they won, Mavuika brought the heroes back to life except for Tenoch because, as we saw with Kachina, if Mavuika can't find an ancient name, she can't bring a person back to life. As a consequence, Tenoch's ancient name kept existing, but no one inherited it anymore, so it sank to the bottom of the Night Kingdom, and when Shilonen gave the Traveler the ancient name, she said that Tumaini emerged from the very bottom of the River of Souls. My theory is very simple, and Ororon is actually perfectly right. Tenoch's ancient name, Shuja, became the foundation for the creation of the Traveler's Wand, Tumaini, because in Natlan only a hero could have finally brought hope. When it comes to the obvious unresolved matter regarding Tumaini though, Xilonen is still alive, despite the fact that she should have used her life to forge this ancient name. In Tumaini's description we see both wisdom and blessing, so Ukumbuko and Baraka, Citlali and Xilonen's ancient names, which means that they forged Tumaini together and Citlali's long lifespan might have solved the issue, but Xilonen never even slightly collapsed, so I think this will also come back in a future quest. I mean, Mavuika perfectly knew the price Xilonen would have paid to forge this ancient name, and she definitely already had a plan to save her before even asking her to do it. By the way, kinda off topic, Tumaini's description ends with two more ancient names, Miracles and Strength. While we already know Strength, Uezo, Iansan's ancient name, the other one that should be Mujiza might end up being either Varesa or Ifa's ancient name. Talking about the Night Kingdom instead, we finally received an answer to a specific question. The Night Kingdom is completely isolated from the Leylines of the other nations and as a consequence from Irminsul, which is literally what I've been saying since 5.0. It just couldn't be connected for two main reasons. People couldn't leave Natlan's borders or they would have faced memory loss and emotional issues, so they simply couldn't access the memory store in the Night Kingdom if they went too far from it, nor had the Wayab or the Lord of the Night enough power to extend their protection. This means that the memories in the Night Kingdom didn't flow through the Leylines of Teyvat. The other reason is even more obvious. The Abyss invaded the Night Kingdom, so if it was connected to the Leylines, it would have corrupted Irminsul, and since we now know that Forbidden Knowledge is a manifestation of the Abyss, we perfectly know what would have happened. Moreover, we were told that the Night Kingdom is a network of memories similar to the Leylines, meaning that it mimics Irminsul's functions, so when Citlali said that the souls that couldn't go back to the Night Kingdom wouldn't have been able to be reborn, it simply means that, once again, I was right when I theorized that Irminsul simply acquires the memories and souls of the dead and reuses them to create new lives. Now, a major problem in Natlan before Capitano's sacrifice was that foreigners who died in Natlan weren't granted access to the Night Kingdom, which was Ronova's way to prevent the exploitation of the Odo Resurrection, nor could they go back to the normal Leylines because they had been long severed, so they were doomed to wait until their souls simply disintegrated into nothingness. This also applies to anyone from Natlan who left the nation without the Wayab's permission. Natlanese people don't belong to the regular Leylines, so they couldn't go back to them, and this can be confirmed because Capitano tried in every nation to save the souls he was carrying in his heart, the souls of both Carian and Natlanese people, but the Leylines never granted access to any of them. After Capitano's sacrifice instead, the problem was apparently resolved because the Lord of the Night can easily protect the Natlanese people abroad, and foreigners who die in Natlan are now granted access to the Night Kingdom, but this actually poses an even bigger problem. Natlanese souls will always be able to go back to the Night Kingdom thanks to the Lord of the Night's protection, but the souls of the foreigners who die in Natlan will never go back to their own Leylines. They will become part of the Night Kingdom, and they will be reborn as Natlanese people, so they'll never be accepted by the Leylines ever again. This means that the Night Kingdom has the potential to drain Irminsul of its souls, reason why the Lord of the Night said that these new rules Capitano added are very risky for the Heavenly Principles. Of course, this also reminded me of the Loom of Fate that the Abyss Order has built. It has the ability to create new Leylines that cannot substitute nor extend the pre-existing ones, so what they'd be creating is basically another network that works the same way as the Night Kingdom, completely isolated and independent from Irminsul, and as a consequence disconnected from the Heavenly Principle's fate. What the Abyss Order is trying to do is most likely to have the Carian souls go through a personalized cycle of death and rebirth, so that the people of Caria could be reborn without the curse and free from fate. At this point, I am looking forward to Dainslev's new quest because it might end up being extremely interesting. Lastly, out of curiosity, since the Night Kingdom is completely isolated from the other nations' Leylines and Irminsul, doesn't this mean that Mavuika remembers about Rukkhadevata? Talking about the Leylines, Mavuika said that the Heavenly Principles created the Leylines and with their protection, Teyvat could nurture life, while the Lord of the Night said that the Heavenly Principles modified the Leylines so that they would counter the Abyss, and this was before Xuquatl severed them in Natlan. These statements contradict each other, but I tend to believe an angel who had been in Teyvat since its inception. This means that the Leylines originally had a different purpose, and in my last video I said that they were used to acquire materials from the old world of the dragons and convert them into useful materials for the creation of the new world, Teyvat, just like the murals in the domains depict. But when the second Who Came arrived, the world was capsized, Irminsul ended up on the other side and the process was halted. Something also important is the fact that Mavuika somehow knows that the Abyss is affecting multiple worlds beyond Teyvat, meaning that the Abyss is just like the Honkai in ShadowXImpact or either in Zenless Zone Zero. In all three games, this alien power can corrupt people, turning them into mindless monsters, but it can also be understood and used by the people, but I'll come back to this in a moment. Now, if the Abyss is a natural and unavoidable occurrence of the universe just like the Honkai, then the Primordial One might have created the Void Realm that contains the Abyss on purpose. By sealing the Abyss in one of the realms of Teyvat, the world would have met the condition that the Abyss has to be present, preventing more abyssal power to come, but since it was sealed, it also couldn't cause any problem. When the second Who Came and the Heavenly Principles arrived though, the word they brought broke the world and opened rifts that allowed the Abyss to leak inside the human realm. As Nabu Malikata said, the Heavenly Principles brought illusions that can break through the shackles of this world, which is, as we saw in Sumeru, what the Abyss is capable of. The Heavenly Principles then tried to fix the problem by repurposing the Leylines, but when that didn't work, they panicked and they sent down the Celestial Nails to mend the world to close those rifts, but clearly it was already too late. As for the unanswered question for this chapter, we are still waiting for the day when they'll acknowledge the fact that there's a Celestial Nail in the Night Kingdom. Anyway, back to the Abyss, we were told that it is toxic to both humans and dragons, and yet the Dragon Sovereigns in particular used it to fight the Heavenly Principles. The definition of toxic then doesn't necessarily mean lethal. A pep, for example, differently from Rukkhadevata, can analyze and understand it if it's in small doses, so it becomes a question of tolerance to poison, and she was only corrupted by it because Deshret dropped on her a ton of it all at once. Again, just like the Valkyries have Honkai adaptability and the people of New Eridu have Ether aptitude, the same can be applied to the dragons but also to some people, like the Sinners from Khaenri'ah. This may also explain why Ochkan defined the Abyss as a power within human comprehension, and just like Renee, he expected humans to gradually adapt to it, which sounds like Project Stigma, but I'm not going down the rabbit hole of the dream world of Teyvat right now. Next is Ronova. First of all, we now know why we saw Capitano in front of the throne in Ochkan back in the 5.2 trailer. Now, honestly, I was expecting something more from the first officially introduced and met Shade, while all we got was a bored Yuha, and I'm not kidding, I think they went for the design because of Bleach. We didn't learn anything new with her, apart from the fact that an angel's duty toward humanity is way more important than what a Shade wants. That being said, I was extremely satisfied by how Capitano challenged her into a losing game. In theory, Ronova simply couldn't win. She either gave up and lifted the curse, or gave up anyway and allowed the paradox, since Capitano's death satisfied Ronova's request for her life, but the curse of immortality, or as Capitano called it, the curse of absolute life that she created, prevented that same very death. I said in theory because one thing really doesn't make sense at first glance. Ronova could have simply said, "No, I won't accept your sacrifice in Mavuika's stead. She used my power, she needs to die, and since the Night Kingdom didn't accept foreigners' souls, he couldn't have merged with the Lord of the Night." My solution is very simple. She was acting just like Sasti. Back then, she said that she wanted to stop human arrogation, but she sent Lumine, the one who caused the cataclysm, immediately back to the surface, and 500 years later she even released a Descender, someone who can challenge fate itself. Similarly, Ronova allowed the paradox that would uproot the natural order of the world, so my theory is, and always has been, that the Shades are secretly rebelling against the Heavenly Principles. Ronova knew Capitano's plan because he had already tried to do it in other nations, and she allowed Yohaltekutin to wait for Capitano so that he would challenge her. At the same time, she was probably instructed by the Heavenly Principles to lay down the Curse of Immortality on Caria, and she had already defied them when she accepted Xbalanque's deal, so she couldn't have done it again. So she used Capitano's plan to show the Heavenly Principles her loyalty by not lifting the curse, because seriously, the Night Kingdom is isolated, so lifting Capitano's curse and having him die wouldn't have changed anything into that. But at the same time, she caused problems to the Heavenly Principles by allowing the paradox. Now, his sacrifice makes perfect sense story-wise, but is this really how Capitano's story is gonna end? They didn't really explain how, or above all, why Caria modified his heart to convert memories and souls into knowledge. Then he took his helmet off, but they didn't show us what's underneath, and they didn't even show us his face in the cutscene, which feels like Kalpas all over again, so his story just can't be over yet. It makes no sense to end it like that. Mika literally saw more of his face than us, and even Halfdan had a better ending. Lastly, about the Archon Quest, Capitano told the Tsaritsa that he decided not to get the Gnosis anymore, and being the last one she needs, Mavuika deduced another Harbinger will be sent to Natlan. Pantalone and Pulcinella never leave Snezhnaya, Sandrone never even leaves the workshop, Child and Dottore are busy with Project Stuja, and I don't think Arlecchino will be sent to Natlan, so the only one left is Colombina. One of my viewers also made me notice that Trinon wears a similar piece of lace on her eyes, so it might be a hint about Colombina's arrival. But we are also somehow certain that she is a Seelie, and if she is, it would make things very interesting because she might solve some unresolved matters regarding the Night Kingdom, like the Abyss tumors that are still present even after the events from 5.3. In those same ending notes, Mavuika also told us that the fragments in the sky are Ancient Moon's remnants, relics of secret source technology created by the ancient dragons. Now, which moon are we talking about? Is it one of the 3 moons that were in the sky at least until the Celestial Nails descended, as the murals on Tsurumi Island say, or is this something even older, considering that the dragons have been in Teyvat since the beginning? This obviously reminded me of Xbalanque, since we basically placed a moon in the sky to help the venturers come back from beyond the world. Mavuika also told us about Dottore's subordinates who immediately arrived when the fragments appeared, but also that his stronghold, probably Heresis, is located in Not Cry, where the people can use a unique power that predates the 7 elements, so from before the Heavenly Principles' arrival. Mavuika also said that the project that connects the Ancient Moon, Dottore, and that unique power must be an ambitious one, and the only project we know the Fatui are working on is Project Stuja. Now, my theory about Not Cry and its power is very simple, and I actually talked about it before this place was ever mentioned. I think Not Cry is the Moonlight Forest from the Pale Princess and the 6 Pygmies, the only place free from the rules of the Night Mother, just like Not Cry is part of Snezhnaya but doesn't follow its rules. I know the entire book has been leaked long ago, but I've only read the first available volume, so no leaks in the comment section, please. Lastly, about the fragments in the sky, I bet most of us tried to see what they looked like from the other nations, I certainly did, but we couldn't find them because as soon as we walked past Natlan's borders, they simply disappeared. This is not because of the game graphics, it's a reality of Teyvat, because Mtwa, a Natlanese member of the Saurian Relics Association we can find in Mondstadt, also tried to do the same, only to see them disappear as he was leaving Natlan. Mtwa though also told us that they look a lot like the fragments that can be found in the western mountains of Natlan, so where the volcano of Tolan is. And together with what Akatel, the chief of the Collective of Plenty, said, that is that at the end of the earth lies primal fire, I was reminded once again of Xbalanque, specifically the ends of the sky behind the Whispering Isle, where we place the moon in the sky. Is Natlan close to the borders of Teyvat? Moving on, when it comes to Citlali's story quest, I was said that we weren't told why she has a longer lifespan, but I think they gave us a hint about it with Ayele's soul in the Archon Quest, because she says Citlali's name is
dazzling, just like the stars in the sky.
So my theory is still the same, Citlali might be half angel. She might be Kuntur's descendant, because his mother was Hoyor, a being that fell from a star, so she was probably an angel. Anyway, in the story quest we got two pieces of information. Pantalones' subordinates are in Fontaine, although we already knew about it since he created the credit coupons used in the Fortress of Meropide, but above all, the Traveler has finally confirmed that he also has a longer lifespan, and no one, neither Citlali nor Paimon, was surprised by it. Mavuika's story quest instead gave us a lot, because we met Xbalanque, the one I called the Cape Archon because I got the funny bug you might have heard of. In this video, I will ignore what Xbalanque said about Paimon because I have a full Paimon Sussman video coming up to show you who she actually is. In this quest, Citlali told us that some Archons of the past had longer lifespans similar to her, so there have been fewer Archons than we expected, but more importantly, Xbalanque told us that he convinced Ronova with the promise of perpetual existence and the everlasting flame of life, but in Chinese and Japanese, he actually said that he convinced her with his eternal existence and his eternal flame of life. You'll think I'm crazy, maybe I am, but hear me out, because if I'm right, this is huge. This is definitely the secret the Pyro Archon will share with the Traveler, as Stainslef said in the Travail video, especially because Mavuika still hasn't told us any secret at all. In my Natlan video, I said that Xbalanque is definitely not a regular human, both because he didn't appear in the Fate of the World and because Ochkan was simply obsessed by his true humanity. Then we just learned that Xbalanque basically gave Ronova his eternal life in exchange for a way to save Natlan, which could also mean that the Shades are not exactly healthy, and he also negotiated with her on her same level. But why would she do that with a simple human just because he defeated a weakened, corrupted Dragon Sovereign? He then became the first Pyro Archon not because of the Archon War, considering there are no gods in Natlan that could have fought it to begin with, but because of his deal with the Ruler of Death, which means that this might have happened before the Archon Wars began. And we also learned that the Pyro Divine Throne was created because of his deal with Ronova. Lastly, when Xbalanque came back to life in the present, only his soul could be resurrected, not his body. And since this was a deal he made with Ronova, it would have been pretty easy for her to preserve his body for such an occasion. But she didn't, namely because his body may not be available anymore. In case you haven't figured out what I'm about to say, the reason why Xbalanque's body couldn't have been resurrected is simply because it was used by the Heavenly Principles to forge the Seven Noses. I think Xbalanque is the third Descender, and the reason why in Japanese the remains Skirk talked about are called ikotsu, a word that only means either the ashes of a dead body or the remains of someone who died in war. It's because Xbalanque entered the sacred flame, hence the ashes, and he died to find a solution for the war against the Abyss, so he technically died in war. If I'm right, then it also makes sense that Xbalanque, a descender with amazing elemental compatibility, became the Pyro Archon of Natlan, since the elements of the human realm all come from phlogiston. To conclude the video, I have a theory about the lost tribe of Natlan. Months ago, one of my viewers sent me a picture of Mavuika's bracelet because it has 7 triangles, of which only 6 are colored, and they are Cryo Light Blue, Dendro Green, Electro Purple, Hydro Blue, Pyro Red, and Geo Gold, so the colors of the elements of the 6 tribes of Natlan. Obviously, it has never made sense that in Natlan there's a tribe for each element except for Anemo, especially since the people of Natlan grew alongside Sun and Wind, so the colorless triangle should have been Anemo Teal. In the description of the 1000 Blazing Suns instead, Xbalanque saw the future of the nation inside the Sacred Flame, so Ochkan becoming the Python King, Manku and the Scarlet Eye used sacrifice to fuel the Sacred Flame, but also the Lost Tribe wandering the land fighting for freedom, so it's clear that we're talking about Vanessa's tribe. Now, for there to be a 7th tribe, there should also be an area for their settlement, and excluding Ochkanatlan, since it was originally Chichen Uchtoka, an ancient dragon city, the Anemo tribe really has no place, unless this area simply doesn't exist anymore. My theory is obvious at this point. The place, later known as Mare Jivari, may have originally been where the Anemo tribe lived. Why the tribe left Natlan is unknown, but I think they were invaded by the Abyss, the area was corrupted and the wind stopped blowing, reason why there's no wind in Mare Jivari. Having nowhere to go, the tribe simply left the nation and coincidentally or intentionally, they ended up in the Anemo nation. Since their area had been gravely affected by the Abyss, this could also explain why the invasion during the Cataclysm was stronger on the westernmost part of Natlan instead of the easternmost one closest to Canria. Now the 7th tribe causes some major issues. The future of the Anemo tribe Xbalanque saw happened after the 2nd Archon entered the Sacred Flame, so 40 to 50 years after Xbalanque did the same, since Yupanqui fought with both Archons. If Xbalanque only saw them arriving in Mondstadt and fighting for their freedom, then they might have left before Xbalanque was born. And this is fine, because Vanessa's story takes place 1000 years ago, but the tribe had wandered for generations before they were enslaved. If instead he saw the entire history since when they left Natlan to when they fought in Mondstadt, this would mean that the Anemo tribe was still in Natlan in Xbalanque's time. But then why wasn't there a 7th hero from this tribe instead of one who doesn't belong to any tribe at all? But above all, regardless on when they left, what happened to the Anemo Saurians? Was Ranjit's Steel Saurian hat a very subtle hint at a future quest about the lost Anemo tribe? Is Bennett, who seems to have been found in Mare Jivari as an infant, technically a member of the Anemo tribe? I kinda hope that he goes to Natlan and receives a Night Soul's blessing because of his origins now. And lastly, if I'm right, after we finally visit Mare Jivari, Venti will tell us Vanessa's story just like in the manga, since the Traveler is Pyro aligned. So we might finally learn or actually go to the floating island of Celestia. And that's it, I hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, and if you're interested in Genshin Impact theory videos, consider subscribing. Very briefly, my next video will be about Italian according to Wuthering Waves, then the Paimon Sussman video, and after that I will definitely make a video about Star Rail 3.0 because I will make videos about Amphorius. Okay then, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, over and out.